أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to you all. Welcome to this afternoon's session. My name is Babar Mirza, and you are here to listen to a couple of presentations in relation to the You Teach program. Okay, I was just waiting for the number of participants to go over 30. It has, so let's make a start. So first of all, thank you all for joining us this afternoon, inshallah. Perhaps it's evening where you are, because I know there are a few of you who are also tuning in from abroad. As I said, my name is Babar Mirza. I'm a head teacher at a primary school here in London, UK. I'm also the Director of Education for Nida Trust. I'm joined by Brother Marwan Elfallah, who is the Senior Lecturer, Initial Teachers Training at the University of East London, which is obviously here in London, UK. We are going to be talking about teaching, and that's why you're here. Hopefully, I know that some of you are probably teachers already. Some of you perhaps are thinking about becoming teachers, and this is what this session is all about. So we're going to be talking about teaching. I'm going to be talking, hopefully, inshallah, about the prophetic tradition, that teaching is a prophetic tradition. And Brother Marwan will be talking about the routes into teaching if you live here in the UK, kind of much more practical session there. And then, of course, if you have any questions, then inshallah we'll take some of those a little bit later on. Okay, I want to talk about the You Teach program. You Teach program is a flagship project by Nida Trust, and it started a decade ago, more than a decade ago actually. I think it was about 2008 or 9. Mashallah, time does pass very quickly. So more than a decade ago, and it was in response to a conference that Nida Trust ran in 2007. And this conference took place, in fact, 2007 and 2008. And it took place at the London Central Mosque in central London. And the title was Raising the Achievement of Muslim Pupils. And of course, at that time, we were looking at the data, and the data was very depressing, to be honest, looking at the attainment of Muslim communities, and we're talking about the Pakistani, the Bengali, the Somali, the Turkish communities, and in comparison to the national average, and we're talking about academic success here, of course, you know, GCSEs and your primary SATs, etc., reading levels and those sorts of things, Muslims featuring very low compared to the national average, and that's obviously something very worrying. The number of Muslims entering into universities as well being much lower than other communities and other faith groups as well. So this is the reason why we had that conference. And what that conference told us, what the stakeholders told us, the students, the parents, teachers, the governors, and also the academics who attended, they were telling us, amongst many things, that one of the ways that you can raise the achievement of Muslim pupils is to have more Muslim teachers in state schools to serve as role models. So role modeling is an incredibly important part of improving any situation for any community. And so whether it's the Muslim community, which is obviously a very broad community, but if you're looking at particular ethnic groups who are currently underachieving, the Pakistani community and the Black Caribbean community, the white working class communities, role modeling is really important, perhaps males. So having more male role models in primary schools, for example, I know that was a big thing a few years ago. We've got lots of males in primary schools now. And the purpose of that was role modeling. It's really, really important, and it has had an impact. So over the past decade, we've seen a significant jump in the number of Muslims becoming teachers and entering into schools. And those teachers, mashallah, I'm glad to say, many of which have moved on to middle leadership, so they're heads of department or they're subject leaders, many moving into senior leadership, so assistant heads, deputy heads, and many moving into, mashallah, now headship positions, which is brilliant news. Okay, so we're going to be talking about teaching. Of course, we want you to become teachers if you're not already teachers. If you're unqualified teachers and you want to become qualified teachers, then of course you've come to the right place. Okay, so we will help you, inshallah, not only through your teacher's training year, but through your NQT year, your newly qualified teaching year, inshallah, and we'll stick with you. I'm going to share my slide now. Okay. So just a little bit about myself. Okay. That works. So I've got 45 minutes to convince you to become teachers. Okay, here's my journey. Started off as a graduate in computer science. 3 years, had no idea I was going to become a teacher. And I absolutely kid you what, no idea, not a thought, even for a moment, I was going to become a teacher. I wanted to become a computer programmer. I left university, I became a programmer. Absolutely hated it, didn't like it, didn't like being in an office all day, watching the clock ticking by. I got married at that time. And my wife at the time suggested to me, because she wanted to become a teacher, it's something that she wanted to do. She said, have you ever thought about becoming a teacher? And I can honestly say it had never entered my mind before then. And so as somebody who was working in the industry, my first graduate job as an IT graduate job, really pleased with myself that, you know, I'd started the career that I wanted to start, suddenly decided to change career after 1 year. And so I applied for teachers training, and guess what? I didn't get in. And I say this to all the teachers I come across. I'm now a head teacher, going into my second headship. The first time that I applied for teachers training, I did not get in. I got knocked back. I was told, no, we don't think you're suitable for whatever reason. I think it was probably because they didn't think I was serious enough. Whatever the reason was, for me, it wasn't good enough. I thought, you know what, I think I do want to still try and pursue a career in teaching. So what I decided to do, I left my job and I decided to become a learning support assistant. It was an absolutely fantastic year. I supported, initially I was working in different schools, and I fixed in one primary school at the time. A Palestinian boy, I remember, never forget him. His name is Fadi. He's probably a grown-up boy. He's probably married by now with children. But mashallah, I helped him and I helped his family, and I got a real buzz out of the whole experience of being in a primary school, supporting him, liaising with his family members. I loved it. So I felt as though I had an impact on that one child. Yes, he was a special needs child, had autism, and I felt really fulfilled, much more than I did when I worked as an analyst programmer in a company, you know, looking at the clock. And yes, we were working on different corporate projects, etc. But I just simply didn't feel fulfilled. And being a learning support assistant, working with people, with young people, and I had an impact on one person, that person I was attached to. And for me, I decided at that point, this was something I needed to do for the, you know, as my career. So I went back the year after to the same institution, and I said, you know what, I would like to become a teacher. I know I got knocked back last year, but I want you to consider me for this year. And guess what? I got in, alhamdulillah. I think that they just wanted, they could see that I had really, I was sure that I wanted to go into teaching. And this is something I recommend for yourselves as well. If you're thinking about becoming teachers and you're unsure, going to a school, volunteer, take on perhaps a supporting role of any kind. If you're a graduate, you won't need to take on any other qualifications. They will generally accept you into schools. If you're not a graduate, of course, then you probably need to do a level 1 or level 2 supporting teaching and learning qualification. But if you're a graduate, I highly recommend you going to school. I then took part in a PGCE. That was 1 year. A PGCE meant that it's an academic qualification. It's a postgraduate qualification. So I spent some of the time in university and then some time in schools. So I had two placements, one in the autumn term and then a longer one in the spring and summer. I went into secondary. I decided to go into secondary because I wanted to teach my subject, which was ICT computing. So that was something I was still passionate about, and I thought I would be able to teach that. That's something that so I went into secondary teaching. I then went into a state school, a state-maintained school, to complete my my NQT year, my newly qualified teacher year. Lasted 1 year. The second year of my teaching career, I then became the key stage coordinator, which was great. Actually, I then was then looking after a whole section of the curriculum. In secondary schools, you have Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, and then you have post-16 as well. So I was responsible for an area, and that was really good, actually. I really enjoyed that. And then I went on the next year to become a Key Stage 4 coordinator. And then the year after that, I became the head of department because the head of department left. And I suppose my experience with Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 then enabled me to have a broader view of what the whole department was about, and I became head of department. I then, during that time, I undertook a leading from the middle course, which was a course offered by the Institute of Education, helped me on my journey to becoming a middle leader. So I did that for 2 years. You can probably see, actually, I don't like doing the same thing for more than 1 or 2 years. So I did that, and I joined a program in 2009, an absolutely fantastic program called the Future Leaders Program, a government-funded program funded by the Department of Education. It was an accelerating into headship, actually, getting middle leaders and encouraging them to become head teachers within 4 years. Very ambitious program. And that lasted 4 years, and that meant I had to leave my first school as a qualified teacher. That was quite sad after 5 years, but I thought, you know what, you really got to move on in order to progress. And if there's any advice that I would give to all of you, even the existing teachers, if you really want to progress, you've really got to move on. You can't just stay where you are. And so I did do that, and I moved into 2 roles at assistant headship level. Still part of the Future Leaders Program. I undertook an MA during that time in education, leadership, and management. Again, developing my leadership, if you like. So for me, it was about initially having that impact on that one boy, the autistic boy, and then having that real buzz about making that difference, having an impact. Then obviously I taught classes, or a number of classes, as I became a teacher, and then increasing that influence. Key Stage 3 coordinator, being able to influence more children outside of my class, outside of my timetable of classes, Key Stage 4, and then obviously head of department. Head of department, potentially influencing the whole school, because if all the children learn from your subject, potentially influencing the whole school, but obviously only in one subject. So for me, I really wanted to increase that influence. That's what I think encouraged me to go into senior leadership, and so it's as an assistant head teacher for 3 years. And then I joined the Muslim school sector. Okay, so I joined the Muslim school sector in 2012. So I left the mainstream state school. I learned a great deal. It wasn't a conscious choice, it just happened. Okay, just as me becoming a teacher just happened, this just happened as well. And so I joined a primary school. Actually, I went from being an assistant head of a secondary school to a deputy head in a primary school. And what an experience that was. For 4 years, I did the MPQH program, which is a national professional qualification for head teachers. And then I became head teacher in 2016. That was my first headship role. It's now been 4 years. And I'm going on, inshallah, in September to my second headship role. Now, my journey has always been about impact. And I'll talk a little bit about that, about the way that the Prophet ﷺ taught and the influence that he had, and all the prophets, and what has kept me in teaching. As you know, there are many people who have left teaching after 2 years, after 3 years. And I decided to continue. For me, was about having an impact, making a difference to people's lives. All the way from that one boy, Fadi, and I would love to meet him one day, wherever he is. All those years ago, 17 years ago, to now, where the impact has been multiplied. You know, I teach in a school of 420. If you're talking about parents as well and teachers, you're talking about having an impact on well over 1,000 people. And I'm moving to a school that it's a 3-form entry school, 630 children. The impact grows, and the school that I'm moving to has, it's a multi-academy trust. It has 20 other schools. So potentially the impact there is on 20 other schools. And this is what this is about. It's about growing your impact. That it starts from somewhere, but then it needs to be grown. This idea of transformation. We'll be talking a lot about transformative education, transformative teaching. because it must make a difference. If you're coming into teaching just to make a difference to your own life, then really the teaching is not for you. You've got to be in it to make a difference to other people's lives. And if you can make a difference to one person's life, that's brilliant. If you can make a difference to 30, 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000, then even better. Let's move on. Okay, right. This is something that I have not seen for a long time. I just had a trawl through my some of our training material that we used to deliver a few years ago, and this is what is sometimes viewed as people's perceptions of what teaching is all about. And I can assure you, it's not always like this. There have been times when classes have been like this. You know, every day is different, and that's what's really interesting about teaching. You have your good days, you have your bad days. And I can assure you, your good days are far outweigh the bad days. Okay, but this is kind of funny picture and the perception that people have about teaching. I can assure you, it's not like that. Okay, let's talk about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is obviously our example. And there are many references, whether in Quran, direct references and indirect references, whether in the Quran and a hadith as well. And we know that all of the prophets were spiritual teachers, and that's undisputed, of course. That's a fairly obvious point, that all of the prophets were spiritual teachers to humanity. And in the Quran, it talks about, it is he who has sent among the illiterate ones a messenger from among them, reciting them his verses, purifying them, and teaching them the book and wisdom. And there is a direct hadith talking about where the Prophet ﷺ said, I have been sent as a teacher. And another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala neither sent me as a person who causes difficulty to others, nor did he send me as one who desires hardship and difficulty for others. Rather, he sent me as a teacher and one who causes ease. Okay, we're going to go into this a little bit more detail, inshallah. And there are a number of references to the fact that the prophets were here, came to teach humanity. And they did it through role modeling. Okay, so we know that the ayah in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alamin." We have sent you, O Muhammad, only as a mercy for the whole world. So we know that some of the prophets came for their own people for a fixed period of time, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came for the whole of mankind. Okay, and they taught through their exemplary role model, their actions that they carried out. And we know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is our example, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَفِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةً حَسَنَةً. There is indeed a good model for you in the Messenger of Allah. So he is the guide, he is our example. And this one I love, where we talk about it a lot, and all of these ayat and hadith are very famous. We all know them. The scholars are the inheritors of the prophets, or the scholars are the successors of the prophets. And this is really powerful, because we can also include teachers within the bracket of scholars as well, people who are learned. If teachers are really learned, and we should be learned people, we should be reading books. We're imparting knowledge and understanding and experiences and wisdom to others. As a teacher, this shouldn't be a superficial process. We should be continually learning in the same way as the ulama do. So don't separate yourself completely from people who are learned. We're all on a journey, but inshallah, I pray that inshallah that we are all within that bracket, that we are, whatever the prophets, may Allah be pleased with them all, brought to mankind, we are passing on that message in however small, whether it's to one person or whether it's to 1,000 people. Okay, and further on, and if you look at the society that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam built, very much about promoting education, promoting teaching, promoting knowledge as well. Okay, and we all know that the first word that was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the first verse, "Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq." Read in the name of your Lord, the one who created. Okay, and that's powerful. Lots of people, speakers and ulama, have spoken about this already. I'm sure you know. And that really being a proof, really, that seeking of knowledge and learning is something that is central to our deen. And seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. And that Muslim, whether you're man or woman, and that's a really important point to make, that the seeking of knowledge is something that is an obligation upon every Muslim, whether man and woman. This is direct, instruction that we must seek knowledge, whether we're a man or we are a woman, and so ask the people of the message if you do not know. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So if you don't know about a particular topic or a particular issue, then you need to ask those who do know. So this act of learning is promoted heavily, and I just pointed out some of the more famous ayat and ahadith. And here as well. So we're talking about seeking knowledge. What about the teaching aspect? And we know that in the Quran it says, the best among you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. Teaching, and I know the Quran is mentioned here, but again, if we take a broader understanding of the message of the Quran, and we'll come on to that when we talk about teaching, because when we talk about teaching, although I started teaching ICT, I can assure you I taught a lot more than ICT. I think it wasn't just about ICT, okay? And so the broader aspect of what teaching is all about, really, I would like to think, inshallah, that the best among you teachers are amongst the best amongst us, inshallah, okay? And we know that the hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Balighu anni walau ayah," convey on behalf of me even a single ayah or a single sentence. And this is important, really. So it doesn't matter if it's just a small, if like I said, the impact, even if it's just on a small group of people, that has a huge impact. Okay, whatever it is that you're teaching, it has an impact, inshallah. It will be weighty on the last day, inshallah. And the last part, which is about the Battle of Badr, and this gives the value of education, the fact that the prisoners of war after the Battle of Badr, they had to pay a ransom, and you can imagine the ransom was quite a lot, okay, for them to get their freedom. But if they weren't able to afford it, okay, teach 10 Muslims how to read and write in exchange for their freedom. So that's how valuable it was to the Muslims, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, education, being able to read and write. So much so that he allowed the prisoner of war to be free and to not pay a ransom if they were able to do that. So, I mean, so we're talking about seeking knowledge, teaching, being really important. Okay, let's talk about reading from a school perspective. And if you do enter teaching, you will be teaching children how to read. You will be teaching them how to write. Doesn't matter what subject you are teaching. Doesn't matter what subject you're teaching. Cross-curricular reading, cross-curricular writing is something that you will be doing, whether you're in primary school, whether you're in secondary school. And if you are blessed to be in primary school and to be teaching the youngest of children who enter, you'll be teaching them phonics, sounding out those letters to make words. And when I joined primary school as a secondary school teacher, this is one of the things that really fascinated me. The development that I saw in primary school, really, it's something that kept me in primary. Although I didn't have an intention to stay there very long, actually, I didn't know. I really didn't know. So I thought, let's try it out. And the development I found in primary school was incredible. And children who within 1 or 2 years were able to communicate both verbally, they were able to read, they were able to write, they were able to do so many things within a very short space of time. And also reading for meaning. Reading for meaning is something that over the last few years has gained even more strength. That you find children, unfortunately, who are reading, but they don't understand what they are reading. Sometimes as adults, we read books and we don't really understand what we've read. Sometimes we've got to read it again and again, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Reading a book more than once or twice or 3 times, it's a good thing sometimes. You get different meanings that come from it. But some of our children, perhaps because they are from an EAL background, English is an additional language, they don't understand some of the vocabulary, some of the nuances of the English language. So this is something that you as an educator would teach them. You know, the inference and deduction, you know, these reading skills. There are many reading skills, and really without those skills, children will find it very, very difficult. Sometimes we take it for granted. If I gave you a paragraph of text and I ask you to kind of understand what the author is actually saying, even though they haven't made it apparent, very clear in the writing. As adults, we would kind of read between the lines. We would kind of guess what it is or understand what the author was saying. Children don't always get it, and this is something that needs to be taught. That they shouldn't just take the literal meaning of things. And these are skills, are wonderful skills. When you see it in action, really, it's an incredible thing to see in action. And vocabulary is so important. You know, doesn't matter what school you're in, they'll always be talking about subject-specific vocabulary. They'll be talking about vocabulary that is used across subjects. Many schools now have got word of the day. It doesn't matter whether you're in primary or secondary or what subject you're learning. Just words that you wouldn't ordinarily use. They will want to introduce children to those words. And so this is something that you will all be involved in. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were involved in, teaching people how to communicate, teaching people how to read, teaching people how to write, valuing that. And this is something that when inshallah, when you become a teacher, you will all be involved in. This will not just be for somebody who's an English teacher, you will all be involved in that. Okay, and just to give you an example of my school, actually, and yes, that's me in the policeman outfit on the bottom right-hand corner. And so every year, without fail, I have never not dressed up on World Book Day. And really, for the children, you will do anything. And that's really what's really great about teaching, is that's things that you would not normally do. Okay, you will do for the children. Okay, just to make them laugh, make them smile, inspire them. If they see their head teacher or their deputy or their teacher dressing up, then they are far more likely to do it themselves. So the picture at the top is drop everything and read. Many schools have that. So you're looking at giving them opportunities for them to read. So here we're in the playground, and we've just literally just dropped everything and we're reading for 15 minutes. And we've got another picture where we're in the corridor, and I didn't have space on the slide to put it up there. But really, what this is about is trying to encourage children to have a love of reading. And as teachers, if you can do that, brilliant. If you can do that as parents, because remember, parents are teachers. By default, they are teachers. If you can instill a love of reading, brilliant. Even if you're not an avid reader, there is some research out there that says, you know what, even if you're not an avid reader, let the children see you read. So when they come home from school, pick up a book. Even if you've not been reading, pick up a book just to encourage them. Let them think that you're reading. And that's not about lying, but it's about encouraging your children to read. Let them see you read, and they are far more likely to read. If they see their teachers read, believe me, there are many teachers who don't read at all, other than the text messages or the WhatsApp. This is something we need to change. But reading, you will have a big opportunity, inshallah, to encourage children to read. And really, reading opens the door to all types of learning. Okay, so it's something that encourages lifelong learning, inshallah. So you've got, I mean, ultimately, these are the tools, if you like, to learning. Okay, let's move on. Right, let's move on to the area which I'm most passionate about. And really, for me, this is the reason why I've stayed in teaching. This is the reason why I'm going to stay in teaching, inshallah, until I retire, or as long as I live, inshallah. And I believe that teachers are agents of change in society. I believed when I was a teenager that I could change the world. I was one of those really odd people that felt that, you know what, I need to change the world. And 20 years on, 25 years on, I still want to change the world. And that's why I'm in teaching, because I believe that education and teaching does change the world. And so I believe that teachers have a transformative power. What do I mean by the word transformative? Really improve the situation that we are in, really make a difference. And the areas that I'm most passionate about is tackling disadvantage and improving the life chances of young people. This is the aim of our organization, Nida Trust, as well. That's what we formed for the same purpose. But we want to make a difference and really reduce that attainment gap, that achievement gap, that gap which is, you know, the inequality gap. You know, many people around the world today are demonstrating around the world for the Black Lives Matter protests. This is also part of it as well. The inequalities that you see, the conscious and unconscious bias, the unconscious and unconscious discrimination that we see. And it might be as simple as not having high enough expectations for a particular ethnic group, or a particular gender, or a particular gender within a particular ethnic group. All of those things we need to tackle as teachers. And this is really one of the reasons why. So I believe that teachers are superheroes. Now look at this research. Look at this research. I'm going to show you some sort of research of children before they start school. Okay, so they haven't even started school yet. Okay, and think of disadvantage. Here we go. Children read to daily at the age of 3. You can see that lower income groups do not read generally as much as children who are from higher income groups. Okay, 45% compared to 78%, read to daily. Children taken to the library once a month. Okay, not once a week, once a month at the age of 3. Low income families, 24%. High income families, 45%. I actually think 45% is too low as well, but 24% is ridiculous. Okay, taken to a play or concert or any type of, you know, presentation of some kind. Low income families, 33%. High income families, 72%. It jumps up there. Taken to a museum or gallery, most of those are free in the UK. Low income families, 33. High income groups, 72. So even though they are free, there are reasons why those children are still not being taken to those free services. Okay, more than 3 hours of TV per day at the age of 5. Suddenly the graph or the chart has changed, where the low income group now at 27%, more than 3 hours of TV, and the high income group, 5%. So, you know, before children have even entered into schools, and I now work in a primary school, before they've even entered into a school like mine, they've rarely been read to, hardly been inside a library, never been to a play or concert, never been to a museum, but watch more than 3 hours of television every day. That means they are making sense of the world through the box in the corner of the room. That's the reality. We're not saying all of them, but we're saying a significant portion. You know, 25 to 30% are making sense of the world. This is their main source of education, if you like, through the box in the wall. That's worrying. What difference has that made to their development? Some people might say, well, it doesn't matter. We're in lockdown now. We're all using the internet. We're all using online services. We've been watching TV more than we ever have. It doesn't make a difference. Well, let's see if it doesn't make a difference. Look at the developmental age of the low-income groups compared to the high-income groups. You've got, by the time that they are 5 years old, and that's 60 months, yeah, there is a 16-month gap. 16-month gap. And that's huge for somebody who's 5 years old. 60 months old, 16 months gap, massive. And the results are, here you go. has an impact on vocabulary. And this is something I see every day. So from an anecdotal point of view, I know this is correct. Verbal interactions per hour. So you've got some parents who just don't talk to their children. Yes, and there are some high income groups who also don't talk to their children. But communication and language is far more prevalent in those who are from middle income and high income groups than low income groups. Communication and language. Encouragements and discouragements. Look at the difference. A big thing, books in the household. There are some households where there are no books at all. And if there are any books, there are some free books that have come through the post, compared to those who have at least a book corner or a bookshelf. And that all has an impact. Let's look at the end of primary. So we talked about 5 years old. What impact does that have by the time that they are 11 years old? And these are the figures from the Department of Education for reading, writing, and maths. If you look at the pink column or the pink bars, that's all other pupils. And then sort of the dark bars, the disadvantaged pupils. So you can see that they are performing lower, significantly lower than their counterparts, the disadvantaged pupils. And you might think, who are the disadvantaged pupils? Well, the disadvantaged pupils are those who are in receipt of some benefits, and also those who are looked after as well. So looked after, so meaning those in foster care, and also those who are in receipt of some benefits, or who have ever received any benefits during their whole time in school. Yeah, sometimes called Forever 6. Big difference. Let's look at secondary. So let's fast forward 5 years, and you can see here that the poorer pupils, only under 25% are making the grade. 25% are making the grade. The national expectation, less than 25%. I think the others are not great either. 50.1, that's not brilliant. Okay, that's a national picture, but it's half. Is that fair? Is that the quality? That's what I need to ask. Let's look at prison populations, or what's happening in the prisons, because when children have a lack of opportunity, they really do have a lack of opportunity when they leave school. And some of these children are leaving without any qualifications. They used to be called NEETs, not in education, employment, or training. And there was a study that found that after 10 years, a significant portion of them weren't alive. They were dead because they got themselves involved in all sorts of things, which led to them, their lives ending. Now, if we look at the prison population, and this is really is a complete injustice, well, we find that we already know, this is a picture that's been there for years and years and years. The fact that those who are in prison, when they look back to their school life, many of them, and it says 42%, were excluded. What are the reasons for that? We're talking about permanently excluded. We're not even talking about just temporarily excluded. What were the reasons for that? It's very easy for us to say, well, actually, they weren't good and therefore they deserved it. No, there were issues that they faced in school. And, unfortunately, we did not help them. And we should always look to ourselves. If there's an issue with children and them not achieving, we should never blame them. They are not the ones who did anything wrong. They've gone through difficulties. Yes, even the ones who are misbehaving, quite often that's a cry for help. And quite often in our societies, we just ignore them. And because we've ignored them, they've landed up in prison. And nearly 1/3 of prisoners self-identified as having some type of difficulty or disability. So it wasn't even their fault. It wasn't even their fault. They had some type of learning difficulty, some type of behaviors that they couldn't fully control, but we didn't help them, and so they've landed up in prison. And look at this: 46% of prisoners You know, I have an English and maths level at the age of a primary school child. It's lack of opportunities. And there are many children who go through secondary, and I saw this for the first 10 years of my, you know, my teaching, of children who are struggling through secondary school because they haven't got the basics right. They're still catching up. Remember, those who fell behind at the age of 5, 16 months, remember, 16 months, they were behind by the time they were 5 years old. That grew for some of them to 3 years by the time they got back to the end of primary. They were already 2, 3 years behind. When they got to secondary, they were already 2, 3 years behind. How are they going to catch up? Of course, they were never going to catch up. They were never going to catch up. Okay, let's move on. So I think, and I really do think, and there are people who have broken that mold completely, and I've seen it because most of the schools that I've worked in have been disadvantaged pupils, serving disadvantaged communities, and I've seen it year upon year. Children that just don't make it, okay, for whatever reason. And I've seen children who just completely break that mold, and they refuse to accept. And I know one boy in particular I always talk about. He was a black boy living in a housing estate. He decided he wanted to break that mold, and he got straight A's by the time he left our school. He got straight A's as when he left his A-level, finished his A-levels, got a university scholarship. I check on him every now and then, actually, and he's doing well, alhamdulillah. And I'm sure he's made his mum proud and his community proud. But that happened as a result of teachers. I'm not talking about myself here. He had lots of teachers. In fact, I've got a story where actually he taught me a lesson, where I lowered my expectation of him and he proved me wrong. So I was actually one of those teachers who actually had low expectations of him and he proved me wrong. That's why I mention him always. But there were some teachers who believed in him and said, you know what? And his mum believed in him as well and said, you know what? Doesn't matter where we're living, where you're from. You can achieve the best. And he did. And so the best of people, as mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of people are those that bring or most benefit to the rest of mankind. Teaching is what brings benefit to mankind. I really cannot think of anything better other than charity. But then many teachers are also teaching as part of charity. Many are doing it voluntarily. Many are working in, let's say, Muslim schools where the pay isn't as much as the state sector. A portion of their work is charity. So really, this is what I firmly believe. And we know, so we know that the Prophet ﷺ as well tackled inequality and disadvantage in a similar way. And when the Prophet ﷺ was with the Sahaba, and of course there was a lot to teach, and he nurtured the Sahaba, and the word that we often use is tarbiyah, nurtured growth, in the same way as a plant grows. And he used different methodologies. And what really strikes me is, as I was a new teacher and learning about going through teachers training, again, I didn't know about teaching before. So for me, I was learning about how to teach for the first time, how to talk to children for the first time, how to assess them, how to engage them, actually, because often children nowadays, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, who often played computer games, who often watch, who often are in front of a screen, if things aren't flashing and making sounds, really they're not interested. So you had to really go for it and make sure that you are really engaged. And so looking at the example of the Prophet ﷺ and the different methods that he used to teach, really I was taken aback, and I know many colleagues of mine as well also taken aback, where we could literally connect all of those practices of the Prophet ﷺ to books and chapters in our own teaching manuals. You know, we call it pedagogy or teaching instruction. And this is 1400 years ago, where the Prophet ﷺ was using those methods that I was using in my class. You know, incredible. And so I've listed some of them here. And effective communicate. I don't think there's time to go through all of them. That's another session completely. I think that'll take a lot longer. But just to really skim through some of these, effective communication is so important. You've really got to talk at the level of the children for them to understand. How many times I've seen teachers who will talk, but actually no one is really listening, other than themselves. And that's what you would classify as a poor lesson. And obviously, as part of my role when I was a middle leader and a senior leader and a headship, I've observed thousands of lessons, thousands of lessons in different schools. And so where a teacher is literally talking they're talking up here and the children are down here, or on a completely different wavelength, that is what the Prophet ﷺ did not do. So he talked at the level of the people so that they understood. The bit about actions, which is, there's no point saying that you should do something when you're not doing it yourself. And so the Prophet ﷺ was an example of everything that he was teaching. There was no contradiction. He didn't say something and then do something else. And so when you're teaching, and it won't be just teaching maths or English or whatever it may be, you will be teaching them all sorts of other things. And it might just be about how to behave. You're teaching children how to behave. But if you're not behaving in the correct way, then why should they? For example, you might ask them to listen when another child is talking, but then you might do the complete opposite. So when a child is talking to you, you're facing the other way or talking to somebody else. You're not giving them the attention that you have just told another child to give. Actually, that's just one example, but you never saw a contradiction there with the Prophet ﷺ. Also teaching in stages as well, that you can't learn everything all at once. And I've seen those lessons where teachers will try and throw everything all at once, but actually bit by bit. We now know that teaching a little bit, doing a little mini plenary, meaning a bit of a recap, what have you learned, and then moving on, we know that that's part of a good lesson. And this is something the Prophet ﷺ did in stages, specific times as well. There are times when children, it's not the right time to learn something. It really isn't the right time. And that's why schools nowadays try not to teach English and maths in the afternoon. When children come back from playtime, or lunchtime, as they say in secondary school, not playtime, or if just come back from PE or something like that, that's not really the right time to be doing maybe maths or English. These considerations is what the Prophet ﷺ had. So to get their maximum engagement, individual differences. Wow, individual differences. I mean, this is quite recent when we've even had any appreciation of people who've got different learning styles and different abilities, etc. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ was talking about 1400 years ago, that actually you will have learners who are at different levels, have different abilities, different needs, and you've got to try and cater for those. Those are the differences we talked about, that ignoring those differences resulted in people ending up in prison 10, 15 years later, because they just didn't get it. They really didn't get it. And teachers weren't bothered to plan for them. So this idea of individualized learning, which it's not so new now, but let's say over the past decade, in personalized learning, this is what the Prophet ﷺ was talking about. Dialogue and questioning. Without dialogue and questioning, I don't think you can have what is termed as an outstanding lesson. I've always felt that. The thing for me that makes a lesson outstanding is dialogue, really talking to your children. Okay, it's not about look at the board and or giving out worksheets or something like that, or even going on a computer these days. And it really is about having that dialogue, that teacher and pupil questioning, and really sophisticated questioning. It's not a kind of yes or no, or even kind of a closed or open questioning. A really sophisticated level of questioning can really make a lesson absolutely outstanding. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ was talking about, having that dialogue with them. It is absolutely not the case that we tell the children just to be quiet and just listen to me, because I'm the fountain of knowledge. You listen and write down whatever I'm saying. No. That is not the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are other ones as well. I'm just appreciating the time. You know, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used analogies, similes, you know, drawing, hand gestures, etc. Bringing in physical objects as well, which is always, I think, a good idea. Question and answers, praising our learners and using humor. Wow, who would have thought? Who would have thought 1400 years ago that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is talking about something that we tell every teacher to do? They need to develop a rapport with the children. Children need to, this idea of don't smile, a classic one in any teacher's training course. I say to you, don't smile till after Christmas, they say. I mean, I don't agree with that. Don't agree with that at all. You've got to build that relationship, that meaningful relationship with the children. And it's not so formal. The connection between the teacher and the student is one of love. Children will love you, and you will love them. And it happens through you having a real connection with them, that you praise them for their achievements. Okay? And if they make a mistake, you don't humiliate them. You don't humiliate them in front of everyone. That they listen to your jokes and humor, no matter what your position is. You know, we had an Eid assembly last week in our online in our school. We had 190 people logging in. I think it was about 390 families, so that's about 350 people. You know, I shared some jokes, you know, wore a hat on my head, put some decorations behind me, made a fool out of myself. We can do that with children, with young children. You know, this is part of their learning, part of them making them feel happy, building that connection. Yes, there's a time for joking, and there's a time for really knuckling down. I understand that. But children will really respect you if you have a genuine interest in them and their interests. You know, we've talked about this idea of child-initiated and child-centered learning. Let's look at their interests, what their interests are. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ talked about 1400 years ago. And the last one, stories and anecdotes. Wow. If you are a good storyteller, you've got it half of it done already. I'm not a very good storyteller, actually. I find it very difficult to remember stories and just keep to the story. But I know quite a few who are amazing at it, and the connection that the children have with them is on a different level completely. That they really are waiting on every word that the teacher is. Behavior management is completely secondary. That is your classroom management, your behavior management. The fact that you've established that connection, you are an inspirational teacher. You've got no other need to adopt any other strategy that people talk about, how to get children to behave. You've done it the best way because you've inspired them. You've captivated them. You have become their role model. In fact, some of the children want to be like you when they're older. This is what it's about. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ did, that they wanted to emulate him. They wanted to be like him. This is what a teacher is. Okay, and as I've mentioned already, the character, whatever you teach, doesn't matter what you teach, you are also going to be teaching character as well. Children are going to be looking to your character, your actions, everything that you do. You know, if you pick up a cup and drink it, they will be watching you. Okay, when you walk around, when you open the window, when you take off your jumper, just everything, they will watch. They will come and look through the window at lunchtime. What is Mr. So-and-so doing? What is Mrs. So-and-so doing? They will be watching you, your every action, and they will be learning from you. So if your character is good, I remember when I was at school, we used to open the staff room and it used to have puffs of smoke everywhere. That was schools in the 1980s or 90s. Okay, it's very different to now. Children will look to you. And so what the opportunity here is is to really get children to improve the character. It doesn't matter if you're teaching Muslims or non-Muslims. It really doesn't matter. Character development can be taught to anyone in a mainstream school, in a non-Muslim school, to a Muslim, to a non-Muslim, primary, secondary, sixth form, university, nursery, doesn't matter, adults. Teaching them about values, character, is so important. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ said, I've been sent to perfect good character. This is the essence of our deen. This really is the essence of our deen. That every time we commit a sin, there is a black dot that is placed on our hearts. And that if we do good deeds, as mentioned in the hadith there, it's like polishing your heart. And there is a wonderful program called the Al-Ghazali Project. And they talk about polishing your hearts. They get children to draw hearts and, you know, I've got a polished heart. And this is what children need to learn about, how to be respectful. And I'll talk about the values actually that in my school we started. When I joined my school 8 years ago, came up with these 6 values as part of, with the other teachers there. And you could come up with probably 500 values, but we believe that these are the 6 main ones and they can incorporate lots of others. But these can be taught to literally anyone. And wouldn't the world be a much better place? Wouldn't the West or the East or wherever you are be a much better place? We would not be having people protesting right now that Black Lives Matter if we had these values. Would we have the wars in right across some of the Muslim countries right now if we had these values being implemented? I don't think so. Would we have famine? Would we have environmental crisis? I watched the program just now, where they were looking at the Nile. The River Nile runs across different countries, Sudan and Egypt, and people rely on fish to get fish from this river. But every time they go into this river, they find plastic. People have thrown plastic inside, and it's depleting the levels of fish. There's a lack of respect for the environment. So when we talk about respect, we don't just talk about respect for ourselves. We talk about for others, for our friends, family, our relatives, our neighbors, Muslims, non-Muslims, the environment, animals. Every single one of those values encapsulates the whole of mankind. So respect, if I can read, ihtiram, love, al-hub, honesty, al-sidq, striving, ijtihad, patience, al-sabr, and sharing, at-ta'awun, or cooperation. This is something that, and I always say to the children, these have come from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can find multiple examples of hadith or stories where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba displayed each one of these values. And so really, when you become a teacher, whatever setting it is, you can promote character education, character development, and values. Really, this is more important than the subject you're teaching. The subject is just a means. Your subject is just a means. Character development is most important. I always say this, and I've said this multiple times in my school. I've stood in front of all of the children. If they left with a high grade in maths and English and science and reading and writing and anything else, grammar, punctuation, spelling, if they got the top grades, top score, but they left having not achieved each of these values, then they've missed the purpose of going to our school completely. They missed it completely. The essence of education, they've missed completely. So I think all of us, inshallah, will have an opportunity to, and really there's an opportunity to follow the sunnah, the example of the Prophet ﷺ in promoting character education wherever you go. Doesn't matter what school you're in. And that's a really exciting opportunity, I think, for you all. Also about compassion. This is something that the Prophet ﷺ showed to everyone, particularly young people. And this is something that you have an opportunity to do as well. If you don't have compassion for young people, forget teaching. If it's just about a subject, just leave it. You know, you need to have this deep respect and appreciation for young people and the opportunities that they can bring, and the transformational opportunities that they can, inshallah, bring to the whole community in the future. he is not one of us who does not have mercy on young people. And we know countless examples of the Prophet ﷺ with his own nephews and other children. Mental health is a massive issue. And we can see here that 10% of children and young people have a clinically diagnosable mental health problem. I see it. I see it. What can I say? I see it. And the children don't know what's wrong with them. You know, we put it down to bad behavior or just not being bothered or anything like that. It's just not true. Mental health is real. And if it's not addressed, it goes into adulthood. And, you know, as it says here, 70% of children and adolescents who experience mental health problems have not had appropriate interventions. That's true, because sometimes there is a lack of will. We want all children just to be the same, okay? And I just want to teach and just go home, you know that all children are different. And I say this analogy every time, and people laugh whenever I say it. We are not in the business of making tables and chairs. That would be easy. If I was making 420 tables or chairs every year, fantastic. Press a button, they would all come out. Coming from one side, wood and metal, they'd come out and have your 420 tables and chairs, no problem. But guess what? Each one of them is different. Some of them are very different. And this is the amana that we have and you have. And these children will go out into society. They're not going to suddenly disappear. Oh, it's not my problem. You know, can they not go into another classroom? Can they not go to another school? Out of sight, out of mind. They will go out into society. And if their issues are not resolved, the impact of their actions will be widespread and it will affect all of us. So as teachers, we need to be brave. We need to be able to take the challenge of really meeting the needs of all of the children. If there are mental health issues, there are things that we can do to address them. And whilst mental health to a certain extent, we could arguably perhaps never goes, but we can give children coping mechanisms so that when issues flare up, we give them the tools to be able to control what is happening in their head, okay? And to not just kind of lose themselves. And unfortunately, we've got to face the reality that unfortunately there are a growing number of children who are taking their lives as a result of mental health. And this is our responsibility. And so really teaching saves lives. I mentioned to you earlier on about the needs, not in education, employment, and training. Children with mental health issues as well. We are saving lives. This is what teachers do. Doctors are not the only ones who save lives. Teachers are also saving lives as well. And you know, this is an interesting quote which we always include whenever it's to do with perhaps a session to do with behavior management or something. And this is a school teacher. I mean, he lived about 40 years ago. Psychotherapist, psychologist, you know, pioneered conversations with children and adults. He said, "I've come to the frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis be escalated or de-escalated, and the child humanized or dehumanized." Teachers, your influence is incredibly powerful. You are literally putting prints on each one of these children. And this is the power, and this is what this talks about. You can either put it can either be a scar, so you've scarred somebody for life, or you've put a print on them which really is going to help them for the rest of their lives and keep on inspiring them. There are other things. I'm about to end. I know I tend to talk a little bit too much when I get into things, but there are other things as well which you can teach, not just values as well. There are skills, which again the Prophet ﷺ promoted each one of these. In fact, it wasn't just about knowledge in terms of you know, if we take knowledge as being information, if you like, but also skills as well. And sometimes we term these as 21st century skills now, you know, listening, presenting, problem solving, creativity, etc. But we know, take listening, for example. We know that the Prophet ﷺ promoted active listening. Sometimes children, they're listening, but they're not listening. You know, sometimes our spouses are listening, but they're not listening, okay? What did I just say? And you can't answer. That's because we're not used to actively listening, really deciphering what it is that that person says, okay? So it's a skill that it's a learned skill. It's something that I've been teaching our children at school for quite some time, but it's something the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught 1400 years ago, that you even turn your whole body to the person when you're listening to them. Aiming high, you know, growth mindset is something that's only been around in schools for a few years. That we say to children, if you fall down, you must get up. Believe in yourself, you must continue. Doesn't matter what the setbacks are. That failure is part of success and all of those sort of things. But this is something that the Prophet ﷺ was talked about 1400 years ago. Tawakkal ala Allah, reliance on Allah. That we know that when something is maybe not go, it might not go the right way, that it might be something that's bad for us. That we must continue to make dua, and that we make dua if something is good for us, our deen and our families, inshallah, then may it happen. So it puts us in the right frame of mind. The Prophet ﷺ taught people to be in the right frame of mind always. And this is something, quite honestly, has only been around for the last few years because it links to mental health. So really, skills are another list of things that you as a teacher will be promoting, no matter what subject you're teaching or what level you're teaching at. So values and skills. And I think this is the last one I want to talk about, is about being a positive example as a Muslim. You know, we are living in a time where people's perception about Islam is still quite negative. When children see a positive Muslim figure, be you male or female, you are teaching them to be tolerant of Muslims. You know, I'm not talking about indoctrination or anything like that, no. But I'm talking about how is it possible that if they've got a teacher who they love, whose name is Muhammad, they've got a teacher who they love, her name is Aisha, and then somebody suggests to them that all Muslims are terrorists. Hang on a moment. But I have a teacher at school and I absolutely love her and I absolutely love him. You know, I look up to him or her. She's the best teacher, he's the best teacher. They would not be able to reconcile the two. And they're far more likely to reject that extreme opinion, which suggests that Muslims are all terrorists. And a positive image. So if a Muslim is upright, is caring, somebody who smiles in the corridor, who greets them in the corridor, you know, these are the things I think are incredibly important, particularly in inner cities where you find huge numbers of schools that have Muslim majority, in fact. We need role models, we need male role models. Radicalization is real, you know, radicalization is real amongst some of our youth. We need to present a positive role model. What is our response to that? And I'm not talking about any programs, government-sponsored program. I'm not talking about any of those. And what is that we are going to do as a community? What role, if some of our youth are looking to other people as role models, you know, what role models are we going to put in front of them? And one example I've got right here, and I hope the brother doesn't remind me, his name is Brother Muzammil. I thought he's an excellent role model, mashallah. And as you can see here, he's dressed up talking about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as part of our Seerah week. And you've got other schools there from local schools. And mashallah, what an example. And I know children always respect him, always look up to him. He sings to them, you know, he'll sing to them. You know, how many guys sing, you know? And really, children connect with him in ways that I've not seen, you know, in lots of other teachers. So really, he's an excellent example. If he was in a state school, even better. One thing that my head teacher said to me, and I'm not trying to boast or anything like this, but my head teacher in my previous school in 2012 said to me, Mr. Mirza, I think you're an excellent male Muslim role model for our children. At the time, I took it as a you know, positive compliment. okay? But I know what she meant, is that we had a significant portion of Muslim boys in our school. There were some issues with them. And being a role model, and I wasn't the only one, has an impact. We had Jummah Salah, we used to talk to them after the khutbah. We had daily Salah, we had Eid events, we had, you know, all of this is incredibly important. I haven't used the word da'wah, but it is part of da'wah. Da'wah is not necessarily converting people or indoctrinating people, but it's simply saying people to people, this is who we are, okay? And it's not saying to people behind a table on a high street, or saying it to them through, shouting down the street or something like that, or handing out leaflets or anything like that. It's really engaging with people, and people seeing the human side to you. You know, being those adult, whether they are adults, but also children as well. You know, you are providing a very positive example of Muslims for young people, and I know that they will remember that for a very long time, inshallah. So, really, the impact is huge. I will just leave one quote from Imam Al-Ghazali, who, if you don't know about him, I please do research him and some of his educational theories as well. And one thing that he said is, knowledge exists potentially in the human soul, like the seed in the soil. By learning, the potential becomes actual. So we as teachers are the ones who really allow children to reach their potential, inshallah. Okay, Jazakumullah khair. I think I've gone on a bit too much. Let's move on, if we can, to Brother Marwan. And I'm glad to see we've got 55 people in the room, which is great. And what we're going to do now is we are going to, I hope I've convinced you a little bit to become a teacher. If I've totally put you off, then hey, you know, what can I say? But let's go on to speak to Brother Marwan, who is now going to show you the different pathways of getting into teaching. I think he was also going to show you some of the more practical reasons, I suppose. We joked earlier on that there were some of the more material reasons why you would go into teaching, but hey, let's hear from Brother Marwan. If you do have any questions, of course, later on you can ask them. Yes, Brother Marwan.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan, Babar, for that excellent insight into education being a prophetic tradition. Yes, I'm going to speak more about the practical steps. In some cases, maybe you can call it materialistic, and hopefully I'll be able to continue the journey that Babar started of trying to convince some of you to enter into this wonderful profession. Let me just, Babar, I need to share my screen because my internet actually cut off earlier.
Oh,
so I had
okay.
to leave and come back. So if you can allow
no
me
problem.
to do that.
So what I will do is I will give you the ability to share your. There you go.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. Can everyone see that? Can you see that, Baba?
Yep.
Okay. Right. So routes into teachers. I am currently just now senior lecturer in initial teacher training at University of East London. It is the second largest provider in London for teacher training. I was a teacher in a secondary school for 16 years before I moved into this role, which I moved into just over a year, about a year and a half ago. So I'm not going to speak too much about myself, and I'll get started. Right, session breakdown, why teach, the routes to teaching, and what shall I do now? Okay, Babar's already mentioned quite a lot about the values of being a teacher from an Islamic perspective, and I don't think anyone can argue with what Babar said. And he made a point right at the end, okay, about being a positive role model, and that is something that is essential, and we do need a lot more people from the Black and ethnic minority community. We do need a lot of Muslim teachers there as well, both because there is a shortage. Other things about teaching, you develop your own knowledge. It is exciting. Things I have learned over the last 16 years, I did not know when I went into education. So there's an opportunity there to develop your own knowledge, whether it's in your own field or other fields as well. Everybody needs to get paid, so I make no apologies for talking about this. We have families, or we are single, we want to have families, so I'll speak about money. In the United Kingdom, this is for England and Wales, this is where you start, and it goes up. Most teachers will be in the London area, they will be earning between 40 and 50,000 in the state sector. That's after having a bit of responsibility and having a number of years under the belt. But the starting salaries are there. So if you're not in London, we're talking about 24,000. The fringe area is 25, out of London about 28, and inner London 30. That was the figures for 2019 to 2020. Figures for 2020 will be slightly different. Generous pension scheme. I know some of you might, for religious reasons, might not be a fan of that. Other people will. It's not for me to talk about, but it is the teacher pension scheme, one of the best ones that are available there. Holidays, everyone needs one. Working hours, you will take work home. I'm not going to lie to you and say work ends as soon as you get to the home, but leaving work, sometimes 3:30, sometimes 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, that's not a bad deal for many of us. Job security, it's not 100%. No job is 100% guaranteed, but with teaching, there is a good chance that your job is secure. There is a lot of permanent contracts in most cases, and so it is a fairly secure job. This one here really depends on what you're going to study. There is a generous tax-free bursary there, not tax bursary, sorry about that. Tax-free bursary when you're training in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases. The career progression opportunities, Babar mentioned some of them there. He went all the way up to head teacher. I went into middle leadership, and there's lots of various routes. A lot of people decide that they want to experience some years abroad. There are a lot of British schools abroad, and that door is open. And even if you don't want to sort of teach necessarily in a British school, the value of a PGC or a British qualification is something that can help you go abroad if that's something that you wish to do, whether it be for a few years or long term. I've mentioned about the shortage in BME teachers, and I won't go really into much further about that if you could just have a quick look. Okay, so if we look at that, that's quite a big difference. And if we look at, these are 2018, so if you look at take Bangladeshi, so it's not too far off, 0.6 to 0.8, but if you look at something like Pakistani, 1.2 to 2.0, so the population of the UK, about 2% is Pakistani, population of teachers is about 1.2. And another factor that's more important is if you go into schools, that population is going to be a lot higher than 2% of the national population. So people from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, we are more represented in schools than we are in the wider population.
Marwa, can I just ask a quick question? So the dark blue, the navy blue, is that the population?
Yes,
and then the light blue is population in school.
United Kingdom population.
Ah, okay, just to clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah. So out of it, so there, 1.2%. If you walk of people are Pakistani in country apparently, but sorry, 2%, but 1.2 is what we get with teachers. That was from the government. A very quick video from the government. It's the government basically one of their just trying to encourage you to get into teaching.
One of the issues with videos is that the sound won't come through.
Is the sound not coming through?
No, it won't come through. No, we can watch it, or we can lip read.
All right. Oh, sorry about that.
But the sound won't come through. No, unfortunately.
Okay. Right.
Tell us what the video is showing. How about that?
Video, basically, I'll talk through it. So as you can see,
we can hear something. Hold on.
it's just about making a change in young people's lives. So that's what it is. If you look through it, look at the happiness in those children there. Exams, changing the future. And also the whole point is not every day is the same. It's an exciting place to be when you go into a school. And Babar made it. Not every day is great, but you have a lot more good days than bad ones, inshallah. Okay, right. So Babar's convinced you. I've done my bit as well. You want to teach. Right, so what do you do now? Right, question is, do you have, if you're in the United Kingdom, do you have a UK degree or equivalent? So if you've got a degree from abroad, there are ways, it's called NARIC, they can sort of check the equivalency. And if you do have one, then you're going to be looking at the postgraduate routes. So there is a number of different routes. If you do not have one, then we're going to have to look at an undergraduate route. And that can be a degree with a QTS. QTS stands for Qualified Teacher Status. So we're talking about doing a Bachelor of Education or a Bachelor of Science with QTS or a BA with QTS. So they are 3 to 4 year courses where you will study either a subject and along with how to teach, or you will study education in itself. They're quite popular amongst people who want to go into primary teaching. You'll find it more often in that. The postgraduate routes is a quicker route for people who don't have a degree. And I'm going to spend quite a lot of time talking about the postgraduate routes. This is the most common route. It's the route that Babar took. It's the route that I took as well. And it's not the only route. So main points there, you have 2 different placements in schools. And the university will try and make these contrasting placements. So it might be you go to a school in a slightly more affluent area, you might then go into a different one, you might be in a faith school in one place, a non-faith one. Universities will do your best. You can do it in primary or secondary. Some subjects offer quite a nice bursary. And some providers also allow you to do a level 7 course. That means you can go on to do it like a master's later on. And if you are just now in a situation where you want to teach and you want to teach in September and it's on your mind, you can apply. You can apply now. I'll be honest with you, the best time to apply is probably a few months ago, but there are spaces now. And I know that for a fact. I'm in the system just now and there are spaces. And one of the other thing is with this COVID-19, the issues, universities are having issues with students coming from abroad. The numbers are going down. So the chances are there's going to be more spaces available for people in the United Kingdom. So it is something. The main providers in London, UAL, UCL, King's College, Middlesex, across the country, every single city has got a provider. If we go to Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, so there are so many out there. The minimum requirements are, as I said, a UK degree or equivalent, GCSE Maths and English if you want to do secondary, and that's at C above, and Science for primary. Now, if you don't have it, a GCSE Maths and English. So for example, you came from abroad, you've done a degree in the United Kingdom, but you didn't do GCSE Maths and English. It does not mean that you cannot apply. You can apply, but you will need to sit some sort of equivalency exam. Now, normally these equivalency exams would be done online, would be done at a centre. Just now, because of COVID-19, what's likely to happen is the university itself will provide that exam for you before you enter, or they'll show you how to do it. So if you don't have GCSE Maths and English at grade C now, but you do have a degree, do not let that put you off. And that's the same with science. The place to go is UCAS. Now, one of the other points is UCAS is the place to go just now. In a couple of months' time, it won't be UCAS, it'll be called the clearing system, where you'll be talking to the universities directly. But just now, UCAS is the place to go. And if you go to the website, it will.
Marwan, you'll have to share that screen. So although it's popped up on your screen, you'll have to share that screen. We don't automatically receive it.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. So that's the UCAS website, and it's the way to go if you wish to apply. If you go on there, there's a video that will let you know how to apply, and it's quite straightforward. You go there, you apply, you'll ask to upload certain things. You'll be asked to put forward your personal statement, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Sorry, let me go back in. All right. Okay. The other route is Teach First. And Teach First, they're actually a charity that's designed to try and get people straight from industry. So the idea is you come out from industry, you go into teaching, you do 2 years. So you train and work at the same time. And it's quite a high pressure program. And the idea is after those 2 years, either you stay in teaching or you go back and work in industry. And the option is really for you to decide. A lot of schools do like the Teach First method. Some schools might not, but you're in there from the start. And also a lot of schools do sort of give opportunities for people to progress through that route to get quite high. So I'll need to do a new share. So that's the Teach First. If you are interested, you'll need to go into this website. Applications, it's not as quick. So applications for 2021 are open now, not for 2020. So if you want to start in September, I wouldn't be looking at this, but if you want to start in a year's time, then by all means, it's something that you might wish to look at.
Can I just say, Marwan, it says we're making some changes due to COVID-19. So possibly, maybe they should contact them and find out if there's any difference to that deadline.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, and there's the requirements. You can see this again, can't you? Requirements for Teach First. 2-1 or above. 2-2s will also be considered in some cases. Degree or A-level that satisfy requirements in the website, and CA Maths. Okay, this one is quite an interesting.
Sorry, Marwan, there's no cost for Teach First, is there?
No. There's no cost.
Yeah. One of the questions asked was, is there a cost? I don't think that,
no, there isn't. You're being paid to do it. With regards to let me just go back quickly to the PGC. Just a point about this one. This one, there is a cost, but if you get a bursary, which can be quite generous, that I'm going to talk about later, that will cover the cost and give you a lot more. Next one is Schools Direct. Now, the Schools Direct salaried and non-salaried. This one, you work inside a school and the school will pay you, and they will pay you a wage, and they will give you a chance to get QTS, qualified teacher status. And some cases you will get a PGC as well. Some cases you won't. That depends on what the school has chosen. Then they've got to associate with a provider. Now, with this, you can actually apply now. There are jobs advertised. So if I actually look now, sorry, let me look across England. And right, so I'm going to intentionally choose a subject where you see there is no bursary there. I'm going to choose a subject without a bursary. So I'm going to choose economics. So I want to teach economics. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here where it says salary option, choose options that have a salary, find courses. Right. So just now, if you've got a degree in economics and you want to teach in September, sorry, not if you've got a degree in economics, if you've got a degree in economics or an economics related subject and you wish to teach economics and you want to train and you want to start in September and you want to get paid, here I found three places where you can apply for just now. So you can do that now already.
One of them is at your university as well. Last
no.
one.
Yes, that's what it is. So they work with us. Seven Kings work with us.
I know
so
the school, local to me.
Yeah. So you apply to Seven Kings, and then Seven Kings will deal with us. So that's especially good if you're thinking of if everybody's financial situation is different. So, for example, you're really passionate about economics and you want to teach economics, but you say to yourself, you know what, I can't afford to pay £9,000 for a PGC. I don't want to take out student loans. I don't want to do that. I want to get a wage. This is a really good opportunity for those subjects that don't come with a salary. Sorry, that don't come with a bursary. You can also get that for. You can also get it for some of the subjects that do offer a bursary as well. So it's not just that. Right, this one isn't so common. It's called teacher apprenticeships. So if you are interested in that, I'm not going to speak too much about it. It's not very common, but it's a way of getting qualified status and you're working with a school. Some of you might be already in a school. You might be an unqualified member of staff within a school, and it might be worth discussing with the school, do they have the opportunity to do that with a provider? So I'm not going to go into too much about that. Some of you might not be so keen on teaching primary or secondary. You prefer teaching the older students. There is a post-compulsory education and training certificate, PGC post-cert, and that is an option there for many people. In some cases, they do get a bursary as well. Apologies that I seem to be talking quite a lot about money here, but it is an important factor that I can't get away from. Because I am aware that if you are going to make a decision to teach, you need to look at all the factors. First factor is, do you want to teach? What level do you want to teach? Primary, secondary, or further education? And then the other point is, are you able to fund this just now? When? So I am trying to make sure that I'm going through as many options as possible. So this is another site that you look. I am going to have on the PowerPoint at the end a list of all the sort of websites to go to. And with teaching in, so we've got sixth form colleges, we've got also 14 to 19 colleges, further education. So you're teaching at the level between secondary and university. So it's an extremely important sector, and that might be an option for you. Because I know some of you might be put off by saying, oh, I don't really want to work in secondary, I don't want to work in primary, I want to teach the older students. That might be your case. You might also really want to work with, you love your subject so much that you want to work sort of in a sixth form college where you're teaching the sort of the higher, you're teaching the more able students, or you might be teaching the subject knowledge at a higher level. That's an option. So it really depends on yourself. Right. Right. So the question is, what should you consider? First question is, do you want to teach? All right. Babar mentioned some points about what kind of person are you? Do you have compassion for others? If you don't have compassion for others, then pretty much probably not the best career for you. But do you want to teach? And inshallah, most of you, that will be an option. Do you need financial support as you teach? So these are things that you look at. Does the subject you want to teach have a bursary? If it doesn't have a bursary, have a look and see, are there schools direct options? If there aren't school direct options and there is no bursary, then you have to look at the finances yourself, student loans, all of that. So that's something that you need to think. You might decide that you want to teach, but maybe not in September, maybe the year after. That's the option that you make. Are you flexible with location? So for example, if you do decide to do a PGC, you will need to go to 2 different schools, which will be, in most cases, within 90 minutes of where you live, possibly longer, but are you able to make that journey for 12 weeks at a time to 2 different places? If you're not, and you really need to be in the school 5 minutes down the road, then you're going to have to look at one of these options where it is a school, salaried in a school down the road. But it's a sacrifice you would make for a year, but so it's something you need to look. Do you want to go abroad eventually? If you do and you want to teach, if you have a PGC with QTS, that puts you in a stronger position. The qualification is recognised in a number of countries abroad, so it's something you need. Primary, I should have put a comma there. Secondary or further education. I met quite a few people at a teacher training event. It was quite interesting, and they sort of thought, let me teach. Somebody said to me, I want to teach primary first and then go into secondary, given the sort of idea that primary is a little bit easier and then getting into secondary. I see Babar's laughing there, which clearly he does not agree with that concept. It does not work like that. So the way of teaching primary is different than teaching secondary. With primary schools, you have to know a lot more about pedagogy. It's less so about the subject, but it's also about how to teach that subject to a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. Is totally different than teaching something to someone who's 15 or 16. So there's different sets of skills. Some of them are transferable, some of them are not. But you have to decide, which do you prefer, primary or secondary? And as in Babar's case, he's moved from secondary to primary. That is possible. It's also possible the other way after a while. But I think when you're training, you need to make a decision, which one do you want for the sort of near future. After a while, you develop an education, you can move around. What subject shall I teach? Now, the obvious thing to say is, what's your degree in? Then teach that. But it's not that simple, and not everyone wants to do that. Myself, my first degree was actually genetics. So I could have taught science, but then I did a master's of 1 year in IT. And then I thought, I prefer IT, and I decided to go that route. Some of you might look at options. You might look at finances. You might look at various things and think, what do I want to teach? You might have experience, so you might have got a degree in science, but you might have spent the last 10 years working in business or working in IT, or working in sales, and you think, you know what, I would rather teach what I've been doing for the last 10 years. That option is open. So you're not bound to teach by the subject that you did your degree in. Now, there is something to help people if they don't have enough subject knowledge in what they plan to teach. It's called a subject knowledge enhancement course. So say, for example, you want to teach maths, which is sought after, really nice bursary, but your degree is economics. What do? You apply to the provider. I've got to say, maths is one of the most competitive ones out there. Apply to teach maths if your degree is in economics. And what will probably happen is, if they want to accept you, they'll say, right, you've got a condition that you must do one of these subject knowledge enhancement courses. Unfortunately, you can't do these courses before you get the acceptance. So it's not something, oh, I want to do this before I get accepted. It's a condition as part of the acceptance. And they are funded. Some of them can be done online. Some of them the universities provide space to do it. So it is something to think about. It's an option out there. So you might actually be sitting here thinking, you know what, I've got 2 or 3 subjects I might wish to teach, and then it's up to you to decide which one do you really want to do. The other thing is, when do I want to start? Am I ready? Do I need experience? Now, Babar mentioned that he went at the start, he was rejected, and it could have been that he didn't have enough experience. That might have been the reason. He went and got that experience. The more experience you have, the stronger you are when you go to the interview. Now, I interview quite a lot of people. Now, it's not a requirement. I'll be honest with you, it's not a government requirement that you must have had experience in school. However, it's preferable. If I've got 2 candidates, one of them has been into school and knows what the school environment is, and the other one who hasn't, I'm more inclined to the one who has. That goes without saying. Unfortunately, with the situation just now, volunteering in schools is extremely difficult. It will become easier. But even if you don't volunteer in schools at this precise moment, because of the coronavirus, make sure you are looking into education. Attending this, to be honest, this is a really good step, because you've actually showed you're interested in education. You might have kids at home, children at home. Look at what they're learning. Go on the BBC Bite Size, go on these things, and get yourself familiar with what's being taught out there, even if you can't go into school just now. So that's something. I've been interviewing people in the last few weeks, and a lot of them have said, I've signed up to go into a school, but I can't go in. Someone who's told me he's signed up is in a much better position to me than someone who says, no, I've not even thought about it. So that's something you need to think about. Right, applications, UCAS for a PGC or for a Bachelor of Education, BSc. Ensure you have a well-written personal statement. Check things like spelling errors, grammar, go over these things. And to me, what I'm looking for when I look through someone's personal statement, I want to know is, why do they want to teach? What can they bring to the classroom? I'm not looking to see that this person's absolutely amazing. If they're absolutely amazing in the subject knowledge, but they're not talking about children, they're not talking about wanting to make a difference, they're not talking about how to make a difference, that doesn't appeal to me as much. So it's about, what can you bring? Don't copy something from the web. Make it personal. Make it about you. What can you bring in? If you're not teaching your specialist subject, and this is something I notice when I'm interviewing, I have people that are applying for computing PGC, and I can tell that they're applying for the bursary. Okay, I've had a trainee, I've had someone come in an interview, I've asked them, what have you taught? and he's been in schools, he's done a number of different subjects, but he's done nothing about computing. Okay, what have you done to enhance your computing knowledge? Nothing. And I'm thinking, why do you want to teach computing then? Why aren't you teaching one of the other ones? And I know the reason. The reason is he wants the bursary. Now, I understand that in some cases, but if you're going to go for a subject that's paying a generous bursary, you have to show that you're interested in that subject. There has to be an interest. So if you have looked at it and you've decided, right, I want to teach maths, or I want to teach computing, or one of these with a nice bursary, make sure that you're starting to research that subject, and because otherwise it doesn't look good and you'll be caught out the interview. I've mentioned GCSE English and Maths. There are places that do equivalency tests. One of them is called A-star equivalency. It's now, because of the coronavirus, it's not so easy to get these done, but universities will arrange it. So do not let that put you off just now. DBS, that's basically a check on your any convictions issues. The sooner you get it, the better. There's enhanced and standard. The enhanced one is what you need for schools. Babar's head teacher knows he's not going to allow anyone into the school, okay, that is a risk to the children. If you've done something you shouldn't have done when you were younger, you were 16 years old, you got into a bit of a mess, and you're no longer like that, you can still become a teacher. It does not mean that you can't. But what it is it might be a little bit more difficult depending on the nature of crime. So if the crime was, the longer ago the crime and the less it was, then that's still, so there are people there that will have things on their DBS, but it's not an automatic, no, you can't do it. So that's something that you need to look at. If you've obviously the more serious, anything with children, that's going to be a big question mark, or anything with violence. But violence a long time ago as a 16 or 17-year-old when you were immature and you're now 25, 26, slightly different than violence, say, 1 year ago. And also, the more competitive the course, the more likely you will need school experience. Here's some websites go into. I've mentioned some providers. As I've said, I've mentioned my own one there, but I've got to be fair and honest. There are other ones around, depending on your location. That's something that you need to look at. Some of you might wish to travel to go somewhere, but I know for a fact there are places available just now. So if you are thinking of September, it is worth getting into. Also, the other point is we are, as a country and as the world, we're in a very unstable situation. We don't really know what's happening. Teaching profession does offer some sort of stability. So it might be something you might want to think of for next year. Some questions, frequently asked questions. Can I teach with an order and a third? Yes, you can. You're unlikely to get a bursary. Some providers might not accept you, but you can do it. Can I choose to go to what schools to go to? So say, for example, you do your PGC and you say, I want to go to the school down the road and the other one. There's no harm in telling your provider, but the chances are they might not, depending if it's one of their providers. Can I teach a different subject once I'm qualified? Yes, you can. But it depends on the school. So schools will generally obviously want someone qualified in the subject of teaching, but sometimes schools have a shortage in more than one subject. So you might be qualified in history, but you'll teach some geography. You might do some computing and teach maths. I've already mentioned about the conviction. Can you teach? I've answered that before. Yes. I don't live in the UK. I know we've got quite a lot of people from abroad, and this talk has been sort of mainly based on the UK. Can you do a PGC? Can you come from abroad and do it? Yes. And will you get funding? Slightly more complicated. Also with the EU and things. So you can do it as a foreign student, yes. There is also some universities that do what's called an IPGC. So that's aimed for people to teach abroad. So that might be something some of you might wish to look at. I also know that a number of universities are moving to more online teaching from September. So that's something that you might wish to do, and you might be abroad whilst you're doing it, and you're looking at a British university. I hope I've gone through that. There is a lot more to go through, but I am conscious of time, and I think we've actually run over, because I think we were meant to finish at 4:30.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Babar, are we going to take questions?
Yeah, we are. We'll take a few questions. I do apologise to everyone. We have gone over slightly. I think next time we run this session, we'll advertise a 2-hour slot rather than an hour and a half. But thank you so much, Brother Marwa. And let's go straight to questions. You may have answered some of these. I've got 3 on the chat box. Let me start with the first one. You may have answered this one already. It says, I have a question regarding work in the UK. I am in Turkey, Istanbul, and work in a primary school. Some of my English teacher friends, Turkish, want to know what roles, if any, they can take up in the UK. Can they get a work visa? Also, they already have teacher qualifications. Would their Turkish diplomas be relevant?
Right. The thing is, what you've got in the United Kingdom is you've got what's called an unqualified teacher status, and also you've got overseas qualifications. So you could get a job in the United Kingdom in some schools, provided you get the visa. That's very difficult for me to answer the question regarding the visa. The school, there are agencies that I know that work with it. Babar, you might work more closely with people that do this sort of thing about recruiting from abroad. So it is possible. I have seen teachers come from foreign countries and teach in the United Kingdom, but it's
look,
so
I
it's
think
a bit
things have
difficult.
become very relaxed lately, even with regards to qualified teacher status. When I first started teaching, you weren't able to move between primary and secondary and further education. Now it's very fluid. You can move between as long as you've got the qualified teacher status. Those coming from abroad as well, again, it's quite, obviously you've got to have a work permit and all of those types of things, but technically you don't need to be a qualified teacher to work in schools. That relaxed quite some time ago. Of course, most schools, the vast majority, will only accept qualified teachers. But because of the teacher shortage nationally in this country, and I know in other places as well, particularly in Europe, we went to Netherlands recently. But in the UK, things are very, very relaxed. So really, it's about applying to those schools and seeing what it is, what their requirements are.
Okay, I've
Right?
got a question here. What's the best way for someone to get into teaching without a degree? My sister has only done her A-levels. Well, the thing is, what I would suggest is, if you've done A-levels, then you can do a degree, and it would be a Bachelor of Education or BSc with QTS or BA with QTS. So I would look at an undergraduate degree into teaching. But I would say that's the most straightforward way. If you want to become a qualified teacher, you could do other courses such as become a teaching assistant and then later on. But I think if you you put your mind, I want to be a teacher, then I would say get an apply for an undergraduate degree. So
yeah, and I think teaching is a graduate profession in terms of a kind of a class teacher. You can become a teaching assistant and not have a degree, but if you want to be a qualified teacher in this country, you've really got to have a degree. Can I answer this question here? One from, I work in an independent school. Can I continue to work as a primary school teacher and get my qualification? I'm currently not qualified. I hold a BSc biomedical degree and have all of my GCSEs. I would only be able to work in this school and would like to gain the qualification through this school. Can I answer that? Because you obviously work in terms of the university, and so I know from countless examples where teachers work in independent schools and they have become qualified through the assessment-only route. So speak to your head teacher. Your head teacher will know. If they don't know about it, they can contact us at Nida Trust. We can point them in the right direction. And all you need to do, if you've been teaching for a while, for a few years, you will need to put your portfolio together And as long as you can meet the teaching standards in exactly the same way as somebody would meet the teaching standards through the QTS route, let's say, the PGC route. I mean, ultimately, everyone's got to meet the teaching standards. And so the assessment-only route is where an assessor will come to your school, they will observe you, they will look at your folder, your obviously in-school tutor will also be mentoring you. And so as long as you can show that you have met all of the teaching standards over a period of time, and there are some fast-track ones as well that can literally, you take you 3 months, but it's normally about 6 to 9 months. But the answer is definitely yes, Sister Nireen. That is definitely possible. And again, that's all part of the flexibility of teachers becoming qualified. That there are lots of providers now. Yes, there are universities that offer assessment-only route, but also there are also providers as well in certain areas that provide who are accredited and can also where you can be qualified. This question here, Brother Marwan, is the school direct training only provided in secondary schools?
No, as far as I know, you could get it in primary schools as well. If you do the search on, if you go on the website and do the search, you should be able to find, you can put primary as well. So I just did a particular search on economics, but yes, you can do it in primary as well.
Okay, great. Okay.
I've got some questions. So English is a second language. What do you need to do? I think there's a separate qualification for ESOL, which you can do. And that's not something that I'm an expert on, so I don't really want to comment on it. But if you've got the second, there are people that I know that have done secondary PGC, then done ESOL. I've got another question. But teaching abroad, I'll deal with that one privately.
Right.
Yeah. Someone's asking about teaching and then working towards a PGC. Yes. You get what you might wish. You can apply to become a non-qualified teacher. Some schools might accept you. More likely to be sort of a private independent school that doesn't have a lot of finances, so you would be paid less. But if you've got a degree, they might be willing to take you on. You could, however, work as a volunteer. You can become a teaching assistant and then later on do the PGC. I do understand that a lot of people want to get the experience first before doing the PGC, and I fully understand and I fully respect that. And that's an option that people need to make a decision about. So also the other thing that I forgot to mention, I think is a big factor, is there are agencies out there that do look for people to be cover supervisors and teaching assistants. So it's less likely to be a permanent job. But if you apply to one of these agencies, they will help you gain that experience. Schools do need cover supervisors. They do need teaching assistants. A cover supervisor, for those of you that are not sure, is someone that will look after a lesson when a teacher is off, ill, or a teacher's on a course. So they're sort of managing the class, and they have to have some sort of level of knowledge of how to deal with a class, but they're not necessarily experts in that subject. That's actually a really good way for some people to gain sort of school experience.
Right. Can I also, there's one question about whether some people have asked about being an unqualified teacher and then going through the assessment only route. But one question is that they're a TA, can they go through some form of assessment only route? Yes. And if you go to the TES website, I've just tapped on had a look on the TES and it is there. It's called Teaching Assistant to Teacher Route, straight to teaching route. I know somebody who's doing this in another school. So where you're a TA, you've obviously got to have a certain amount of experience. I'm not sure exactly how long it is. I think it's 1 or 2 years, but you can then go from a teacher, as long as you're a graduate, you can go through straight into QTS route. Have a look at the TES website. Just type in Google straight to teaching route, and TES, the Times Educational Supplement. Okay, right. Let's just answer 1 or 2 more questions each, and let's wrap up if we can. Right. Okay. Any more questions?
I've got a few questions privately. I will reply back and give some people my email address.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I've got to let people know is this country's gone through, in the United Kingdom, we've gone through a massive change in the last year, and it's very difficult for me to sort of give a prediction. If someone asks me what's the chances of me getting this or what's the chances of getting that, we were part of the European Union until January. We've now had COVID-19. We've got different pressures on the government. So if I tell you I think you've got a good chance, or I think you've got no chance, I'm just guessing. So I'm really not willing to sort of guess whether you can get a job in the UK or you can't. But so I'm sorry if I'm not helping people out with that question. Don't know if Babar, you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's fine. I think we'll wrap up there. I think we're absolutely right. We can't guarantee you a place, but what we can do is to help you. And that's what this program is all about, the You Teach program. When you start that journey of applying and becoming a teacher, we can help you with your personal statement. We can have a look through it, as Brother Marwan says. Don't copy and paste it off the internet. It's going to be something personal, but we can look at it. So if you email it to us, we will look at it. If you want to talk it through with one of our teachers, inshallah, we are able to do that. If you then get called to an interview at the university, again, we can help you to prepare for that. And once you get accepted, and once you're on your initial teachers training program and you were placed in the school, again, we can help you through that process. There are statistics to say that Black and minority ethnic communities have a higher dropout rate for teachers training courses. And this is where we come in. We want to make sure that you stay there, you remain there, because it's not easy. Nothing's easy. And there are times when you want to give it all up. And that's where we come in to support you and to say, you know what, keep on going, inshallah. So we'll help you all throughout your journey, and also as much as help that you want, inshallah. Okay, right. Okay, there are a couple of questions about where is this going to be? Is this recorded? Is it going to be available? The answer is yes. So it is being recorded. We will send this out probably by tomorrow, inshallah, and so you can have another look at some of the slides that have been we used. Our email addresses, email addresses are the same ones that have been used when you were given the Zoom link. So if you use the same email address that was given to you when you were given a Zoom link, but generally speaking, our Nida Trust email address is info@nidatrust.org.uk. Okay, and if it's about You Teach, then it will go to the right person, inshallah. Okay, all right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, Brother Marwan. I think you are there. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and giving us all that information about the different practical routes into teaching, some of which are paid, some of which are not paid. And of course, everyone has got their own route. Whatever route it is, inshallah, we will help you all the way, inshallah. Okay.
Jazakallah khairan, Babar, for letting me participate as well.
Thank you so much. Apologies that we've taken 2 hours rather than the hour and a half, which was advertised, but hey, we will learn, inshallah. Forgive us for that, inshallah. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.